everybody, it's finally time to start putting the Muncie M20 back together, and this is going to be the first part of that project, and that is reassembling all the gears on the main shaft. So what I've got on the table here are all the gears, all the synchro sliders, synchro rings, and the hubs. Now all of that is going to get stacked back on the main shaft, and that will go in the transmission, and that'll sit on top of the counter gear. But one of the first things I wanted to do was to make sure that the orientation was right on all the parts, and it's really simple to do. So if I start with first gear, you can actually stack a synchro ring followed by a slider, put a hub on there, another synchro ring. Second gear goes on top of that. Third gear would sit there like that. Another synchro ring. Second slider, the second hub, synchro ring, and finally top that off with fourth gear and the input shaft. So all of that, that's the main gear set that's going to go in the Muncie. That'll link up with the counter gear, and obviously this is mocked up. It's going to get put back on the main shaft, and all those parts will fit on here. Now there's a bunch of clips and things that I've got to put in there to get it all to hold together, but it's really important to make sure that they're in the right order, because you can put them on backwards, and you don't want to find that out after you put it in the car and try to shift. So in the next couple minutes, I'll be taking that and formally putting it back on the main shaft and officially starting the rebuild of the Muncie M20. So here's all the gears and parts laid out that I was just stacking on the table, and I actually don't need to deal with all of these, so I'm going to go ahead and get rid of most of them. So just set aside all the gears, first gear, second gear, third gear, and fourth gear. I'm not going to need that. And I am also not going to need the synchro rings right now. And I don't need the main shaft. What I do need are the hubs and the sliders. So that's going to be the first part of assembly. And now I'm going to start to get some parts out of the part kit. So what I'm going to have to do is get the hubs locked into the sliders. So these are going to fit in here like this. And we've got the springs that will hold the keys in. 6 of those. There's 4 springs. And that's what keeps the slider from coming apart, separating from the hub. So I'll zoom in on this and we'll get this put together, and that'll be the first step in reassembling the main shaft. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is lock the synchro sliders to the hubs so I can get these back on the main shaft. And to make sure that I'm doing that right, I'm using this, the Muncie 4-Speed Rebuild book that I talked about in my previous videos. So like I said, I've never rebuilt a transmission before, so it's good to have a guide to do that. It's a pretty cool book because it's like an IKEA set of IKEA instructions, because you got like step 1, step 2. So what I'm working on now, prepare the hub and slider assemblies. And one of the things it talks about in here is making sure that parts are going the right direction, because you can put them on in the wrong direction. So the hubs are positioned so that the forward edge of each hub faces the front of the main shaft. So that's this part here, making sure that that's going forward. Slider's going like this. And the same with the other one. So those will sit on the main shaft just like that. And how do I know that? Because there's a picture in the book that shows me that. So that's what I'm going to do. So getting into the rebuild kit, I need 2 springs for each hub and 3 locking keys. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start piecing that together, get the springs in, get the keys in, and that'll be the first step in rebuilding the main shaft. So I tried to zoom in a little bit more so you can actually see what's going on. So this is the hub. You can see these grooves right in here. So that is where the keys fit in. That's these little tiny pieces. And those will keep the hub from coming apart from the slider. So hub goes on there like that. Stick the keys in. I'm just going to put all 3 in. The book says to put in 1 at a time. I'm going to just do them all. Yeah, you make up your own rules sometimes. This is the spring. So it's just a piece of wire or piece of metal that keeps tension on the springs or on the keys. That goes in there like that. Hopefully I can get it in there. Get some help from the screwdriver. And that takes care of one side. So then I'm just gonna flip it over, keep the same orientation, take the second spring, the same exact way, slide it in. That one I didn't need the screwdriver, and it is locked in. And so now the hub can slide back and forth, and it doesn't come out. And so that's what's happening when you're shifting between two gears, say from like first to second. Keeps the hub from coming out, and everything's going to engage in there. So in here, if you look at the synchro ring, there's notches in there. Those are going to line up with the keys. There's 3 grooves in here. And hopefully that fits in there like that. And then a gear would fit in there like that. So that's the idea behind that. And then when you shift, if I can get it to actually line up and move, that's what locks them together. And when you unshift, pulls it apart like that. So the next thing I'm going to do is install the new rear bearing in the mid plate. And to do that, it should be pretty simple. It's always a lot easier to put things together than it is to take old things apart. So this is the retention ring. This is what clips onto the bearing to hold it in place. So I'm actually going to put that in first. Flip that over. I don't know if that's the right order of doing things, but that's how I'm going to do it because I'm making this up as I go. And trying to slide the bearing in. If it doesn't go in straight, it'll kind of jam against the walls of the mid plate. You have to whack it with a hammer. And now I have to push the retention ring out of the way so the bearing can go all the way in. So I'm going to try and do that. Hopefully I can get that in. I'd have to tap it with a hammer. There we go. And are we close? It is close. Tap it some more so I can get it to fall in place. There we go, just clicked. That's it. Rear bearing is in. Super easy. On to the next step. All right, everything's going together pretty simply, and I kind of expected that because they're all new parts, and I've had my hands on these things for so long that I'm pretty familiar with everything and where it's going to go and how it's going to fit together, but still using the book. So I'm on step 2 of the main shaft assembly, and that is calling for second gear to get put on first. So that's going to fall in place here. Take that, slide that down like that. There shouldn't be any resistance with it going on. It should slide right into the grooves, past the grooves, and that spins free. And then take the 1-2 slider with the hub assembly. That's going to go on here like this. Hopefully I can get that to slide right on. It's got to find the right grooves. Like that. And then the last part of that is making sure that the keys line up with the synchro slider. And we push, and that should be the right spot. Let's see. There we go. So that's it. The 1-2 is on, and moving on to putting the first gear on. All right, so I got the 1-2 slider on, second gear is on, and now moving on to the next step, which is installing the first gear bushing. So this is the first gear main shaft bushing, so that needs to go on. This, I'm not sure how tight it's going to be. I did have to press this off using the wrong tools, so we'll see if I have to put it back on using the wrong tools. So first, I'm not going to put that on right now. I'm going to I'm going to take one last look at this and make sure that everything is oriented in the right direction. So just looking at the front of the main shaft, that's here. Third gear is going to go on here. I'm just talking myself through this. Second gear is here. The hub is facing the right direction because it doesn't have that notch here. So that needs to be facing forward. That's correct. And then the slider needs to be facing to the back. So this tapered edge here is facing to the back. So that's in the right spot. So I'm pretty confident that at least this portion of it is in the right spot, because I'd rather not have to take this apart after I put the first gear bushing back on. So let's see if that'll actually slide on. It's going to be tight. So I did have to press that off. It is not going to just slide on. That much I know. Try it this way. Just going to tap it with the wooden part of my hammer. See if I can actually get it to start to take. I'm having a feeling that I'm going to have to use something to pull this on. Yeah, so that is not going to go on easily, so I'm going to have to resort to another tool to get that to pull on. So one of the things I pride myself on is using the wrong tool the wrong way for the right reasons. So to pull that bushing on there, I am going to use my gear puller kit. It's the same thing I use to take it apart. I know that's not a press. I don't have a press. And so I put all the clamps on here. This clamp didn't go out far enough, and so I put the smaller clamp, and so the bigger clamp is pushing on the smaller clamp, and then I just used all the extensions to make it as long as possible. And I will throw the impact on it and pull that bushing all the way down. Pretty simple, and it's working. So it's going to take me a little while, and I'll inch that thing down, making sure it's not hitting anything, and we should be good to go. All right, looks like it. Bushing's all the way down. Took about 30 seconds, and moving on to the next thing. So using the impact worked really good. That put the first gear bushing on without any problem, pulled it right down. And you can see right there, it's snug up against the hub. So the next step is going to be to install that first gear over that and all the synchros and sliders for that assembly. All right, so getting close to the end on this thing. Let's get it sped up. So the mid plate's got to go on now. That'll go over the first gear. That'll just slide on like this. And we'll see just how much pushing I need to do to get it to go over that area that it needs to press on. Hopefully I can just tap it in there and get this thing back together. All right, so that's the end of that. Hit the bottom. You can kind of tell because the sound changes when it seats, and I am using my little soft metal hammer here because I don't want to mark up that bearing. So it's a really great little hammer. I love this hammer. I also love this hammer. This is my favorite hammer. Hope you've got a favorite hammer. Having a favorite hammer is a good thing. My BAH, big ass hammer. All right, so the rear plate is on, the mid plate is on with the bearing, and move on to putting on third gear. And that will pretty much wrap up the mid shaft, so, or the main shaft. So let's get to putting third gear on this and getting all the clips on. All right, so the next step was to install the snap ring here that holds the bearing in. And the rebuild kit actually comes with a whole stack of snap rings, and you have to figure out which one will actually fit in there, and you want the one that fits the tightest. And the first two were actually too big, so this is the third one, and got that tapped down in there, and it snapped right in place. So next I'm going to be putting on the third gear. So take third gear and the synchro ring, and we'll get that stuck on there, and then that'll be followed by the slider and the main hub, and then we'll go ahead and lock that all in place by putting another ring in there, and that'll hold everything in place. And that'll be it for the main shaft. All right, so we're finally coming to the end of this thing. All I've got to do is put on third gear, the synchro ring, and the synchro slider. Should only take a couple of seconds to get that on if all goes well. So we'll take third gear here, slide that down and on. Fits on like that. Put a synchro ring on there like that. And then the synchro slider, making sure that the hub is facing the right direction. Hopefully that goes on without any problems. Make sure that goes on without the keys popping apart. I did that a couple times where you push it on and the keys will come flying out, and you're gonna have to rebuild the hub. Not a terrible problem, but it does happen. That slid into place. And make sure the synchro ring lines up with the hub. I'm just gonna pull that on like that. So that's in place, that's all locked in. And then the last piece is to put the snap ring on, and that holds everything together. I still have to put fourth gear on and kind of pull everything together, but for the most part, this will button up the main shaft. I'm gonna put the snap ring on right now. Hopefully it just taps right into place. That's it. Locked in. And so that's it. That is the entire main shaft assembly minus fourth gear. Not that bad. Pretty simple project considering all the things you have to go through. And as far as tools, you know, I don't have a press to do this, so I'm going to put links to the wrong tools that I use to do this. So if you're doing this at home like me, like I've never done this before, and I think a lot of people out there are probably going to do this like one time. You're going to probably try and attempt to do it. If you don't have a garage and you've got a Muncie, or, you know, you're thinking about, you know, should I pull my Muncie out and do it? Yes, you can do it. If you can turn a wrench, you can rebuild a Muncie. You don't need a press. You can work your way through this. In worst case scenario, if you just can't get it off and things don't work, you can take it to a garage that has a press and press these things apart. But for the most part, all this stuff goes together super easy. Make sure you got good parts. Replace the synchro rings. They're super cheap. And yeah, looking forward to moving on to the next part of this, which is adding the third gear, and then we'll start actually getting the stuff back in the case. But that's it for now. I'm going to cut this video off and leave it at this, and we'll pick up where I left off in the next video, using the book to guide me through reinstalling the main shaft and the mid plate and getting it synced up with all the other parts that go in the Muncie. So that'll be the counter gear and all the other small parts. So I think I'll be doing that, and then rebuilding the entire counter gear, and that's going to be all the needle bearings and everything like that. I'm going to have to pack all that in there to get it to work, and yeah, it's good to go. I'm really happy with how it's coming along, and hopefully you enjoy watching it, and if it helps, it helps. You know, take a crack at your Muncie, and this stuff is not hard. This is something that anybody can do if you've got any sort of mechanical inclination. I think you can probably pull this off. Like I said, I'm doing this in my basement right now. So that's it for now. I'm going to close out this video, and yeah, if you got any comments, leave them down below, and I will put links to all the tools I've been using, and see you in the next video. Thanks.